The stage is set. The wait is over. The saga continues. The end of the Winds of War was just the beginning of War and Remembrance. This motion picture event chronicles the scope of the world's most turbulent era.
Gentlemen, I want to bomb Japan.
Action!
Writer, producer, and director Dan Curtis was at the helm in this 30-hour television event.
Fellas, camera!
Yeah.
Here!
When I finished The Winds of War, which turned out to be 18 hours, I swore I would never, ever do War and Remembrance. And The Winds was such a huge hit, I knew War and Remembrance was going to be made. I wasn't going back into television. I figured I had done all the television I'm ever going to do. I'll never be able to top myself. I might as well get into the feature business where I always wanted to be. Brandon Stoddard kept after me, and I kept saying, no, 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 no. And one day we were driving to Palm Springs, my wife and I. I was an unhappy guy. And she said to me, "You want to do War and Remembrance, don't you?" I said, "Oh, no." She says, "I know you want to do it. You really want to do it." And I said, "Yeah, maybe I do. Maybe I miss all the action and the excitement and the whole thing." She says, "Well, then why don't you do it?"
The greatest accomplishment of War and Remembrance was just getting it done. When you realize the hundreds and hundreds of actors and the millions of dollars that were spent and the years that were dedicated to doing it, this is an enormous achievement, an enormous achievement. And I don't think it will ever, ever happen again.
Dan has this instinct for the tremendous. He must have it because he just rose to this challenge in a magnificent way. Something about Dan's energy and resolve and, I don't know, slightly lunatic quality convinced me that he probably would be able to do it, and he did. He's just got incredible drive and terrific attention to detail. When we would argue something, I would say, "Dan, Michelangelo said, trifles make perfection, but perfection is no trifle."
Dan Curtis, the director of this project, War and Remembrance, is an extraordinary man. I mean, he directed the thing, and if he'd had the chance, he would have played all the parts as well.
I don't think there's ever been any other television movie or miniseries that has captured the incredible scope, the majesty, the gigantic vista of Winds of War and War and Remembrance on television. I mean, I just think that it's a landmark.
As a piece of TV, it's unequaled. I mean, I know that Americans make some remarkable miniseries, I mean, really remarkable. But I think Dan stands head and shoulders above most because I think it was one of the bravest series ever made. And it took us into the bowels of hell. And I think few other series have ever dared that.
This installation will be doubled westward. Total capacity? 200,000 prisoners for the new factories.
It will be done, Reichsführer.
Tremendous drainage problems to the west, Reichsführer.
An SS officer does not recognize difficulties. He overcomes them. How this is to be done is your worry, not mine.
From Herman Wouk's stirring novel that defined a generation comes the sequel to Winds of War, War and Remembrance, the continuation of one of television's most memorable sagas.
Nobody in his right mind could plan to write The Winds of War and War and Remembrance. It's just too immense an undertaking. I thought I'd write a big novel about 800 pages long and that would do it. But I got to the 800 pages and I got to about 1,000 pages and I was at Pearl Harbor. And so The Winds of War ends with Pearl Harbor. And War and Remembrance starts with Pearl Harbor. And that's how it happened. One book of 1,000 pages and then another book of 1,000 pages. What I thought would take me 3 years took me 14 years, 7 years per book, with 2 more years to write the miniseries of Winds of War and War and Remembrance with Dan Curtis.
See, if I hadn't done the first one, I surely wouldn't have known how to do War and Remembrance. And Woke was right. To try and do the both would have been more than impossible. The way we were going to work at this time was that Earl and I were going to adapt the dramatic portions of the book while Herman worked on all the historical sections. He would then send us his material. We would incorporate it into ours and then send it back to him. And with the back and forth between us, we would end up with the screenplay. So the writing continued with the pre-production. That whole thing took about 2 years.
By far the biggest challenge was hanging on to the history. Movies is essentially a storytelling form. The novel has much more scope and tolerance, shall we say, for historical detail. It's a panorama of what happened in World War II.
When I found out that they were going to do it as a miniseries, that's when I decided that I would go back into show business. I actually had been out of show business for 10, 12 years. I think that Woke is a master storyteller, and I thought that these books were just so overwhelming. And I was so caught up with not only the history, of course, but I was very caught up with the characters and who they were and where they came from, and that storyline of the people themselves, the characters themselves. And I think that's the strength that Woke has, that he can write such an enormous pictorial scope of something as gigantic as World War II, and at the same time be able to come in very tightly on very specific people involved in what was going on, and use those people to show the action of that time. He was really a master at that, and I think that Dan Curtis was a master at translating that to film.
I think it's important that we learn from history. If you don't learn from history, you're condemned to repeating it. I think it's important that the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that fully understands what the human race went through at that particular time.
Mrs. Unruh, I realize that neither you nor Professor Jastrow understand just how fraught with peril your situation is.
War and Remembrance was over 5 years in the making and on location in over 10 countries.
I felt that the story needed to be told. In addition, I knew creatively that War and Remembrance was going to be better than Winds of War, and almost never is a sequel better than the original, and this sequel was going to be better. I knew that. I had read the scripts, I knew what the detail that had gone on, I knew what Dan's approach was, and this was going to be a really great creative piece of work.
Have you ever seen anything more beautiful in your life? Now you got a story to tell, Natalie, huh?
From the ravaged islands of the Philippines, Guadalcanal, Midway, and Singapore, to the battered streets of Europe, Berlin, Moscow, Leningrad, London, Paris, and Auschwitz.
You know, when you go through something like War and Remembrance for 5 years, and these people are working with you side by side under the most awful conditions and never fail you, and they're always there, you become very close. It becomes like a family, and it was one big family. And a lot of things happened while we were doing the show. We were there during the terrorist attacks. They assigned in Europe, and they assigned special police to guard us. Everywhere I went, I remember when we were in Italy, in Rome, you could shoot a cannon down the street. They were bombing embassies and blowing up airports. We were there when Chernobyl blew up. I sent my own technical guys into the area to find out how bad the radiation was, if it was above normal levels, went through the whole thing. They came back with a total report which proved to my satisfaction that it was okay to go, but half the crew didn't want to go. I got pneumonia while we were shooting in Auschwitz. And these guys carried on for me. Well, what I'm saying is that these guys stood by me throughout this entire production, no matter how bad things got. We shot under the most extraordinary, impossible conditions. We averaged roughly 11 days per hour, 11 days of shooting per hour. Now that's wild. I mean, when you consider the amount of work that went into each scene that we shot, the gigantic nature of the project, and what this thing looked like, and what we got on the screen, I mean, that's absolutely extraordinary. But that's how hard these guys were working. We shot in 10 countries. Every time we went to a new country, we would have to pick up additional crew members. We carried with us this army of people.
Torpedo! Torpedoes on support bow, bearing 350!
For Dan Curtis, War and Remembrance proved to be his greatest challenge.
One of the conditions that I had before I agreed to do War and Remembrance was that ABC had to give me carte blanche, that I would not be edited in terms of pulling no punches, because I felt that to show the Holocaust in anything but its most brutal form would be a crime. And I didn't want to be part of that. But what I needed to know was that there wasn't going to be anybody that was going to be censoring me, and anybody that was going to stop me from doing what I had to do. And they agreed to that. And I met with the Standards and Practices Group, and we had an understanding.
Dr. Beck, have you ever visited a concentration camp?
Natalie, Werner is our guest. You and your baby are alive simply because he rescued you. Besides, my idea of staying on here initially is nothing of his problem. Bernard Berenson is a very shrewd and very worldly man.
Aaron, you're drunk.
Nonsense. I've lived here in a fascist country for more than 10 years. I believe we may have a negotiated peace this year, and I, for one, would welcome it.
Welcome it? Welcome peace with Hitler?
Yes, even with Hitler.
Aaron, we're fighting against tyranny for freedom.
It was his destiny, Dan's, in some way, to tell the story in the way that he did it. He painted such a devastating picture of what the truth was. He was able to pinpoint such strong moments of intolerance and savagery that went on in this time period. And at the same time, he was able to tell a love story, tell an intimate story with the huge, meaningful story.
You love me.
I don't change much.
Don't do this to me, Victor. You don't want my love. You've said so. It's hopeless. It always has been. For God's sake, let's just forget it. Let me be. Let me get on with my life.
Don't marry Duncan.
I most certainly will.
You don't love the man.
Go back to your wife, Victor.
With a cast in the thousands, Dan Curtis had the task of putting together actors that could equal the scope of this historic saga.
It was so huge that while I was casting it and setting locations, I had to make sure that for every major role in this thing, with the exception of Pug, but all the smaller parts, smaller major roles, that I would have 3 actors, number 1 choice, number 2 choice, and number 3 choice, for every role of any importance at all, because I was so far down the line if I liked actor A, and I would say to him, you're going to work 2.5 years from now, roughly, but I don't know exactly when.
Why do you think I'm chairing this little shindig? To put the pressure on, to get something done.
No, you listen to me, Huey.
You want to do something useful with your time. Put on a benefit for the Jews in Europe. I mean, that might do some real good, huh? Show the world somebody cares about what's going on. Wait a minute, Admiral. Just one damn minute. You're not accusing me of being an anti-Semite, are you?
Come now, Mr. Cleveland. Byron meant no such thing.
Well, I certainly hope not. I'm in show business, for crying out loud. I like Jews. Some of my best friends are Jews.
When it came to deciding who we were going to cast in War and Remembrance, I had a couple of problems. Everybody was considerably older. With some people, it didn't make any difference. With others, it did. I looked for somebody who was younger for Pug, but there was nobody that I could have gotten that made any sense. And although Mitchum was around 70 at this time, he was Pug Henry.
Mitchum brought to Pug an essential stature. He brought a dignity and stature and personal strength which defines Pug. He also brought a kind of character that was typical of that age, of the 40s, of the wartime era. Mitchum had that, carried that with him. He was a wartime hero. He had that sense. One look at him and you knew all about heroism in the Second World War. That's what he had. That's what made him great.
Mr. President, Captain Victor Henry.
Well, Puddle boy.
Mr. President?
Oh, the Japs made you swim for it, did they?
I'm afraid so, sir.
My favorite exercise, you know, swimming. Good for my health. But I like to pick my own time and place.
Polly was great. I had no reason. Polly was ageless, you know, and she must have a portrait hanging in her closet. She was as beautiful as she was when we did Winds, and didn't seem not to age a day.
Mrs. Henry, your husband is the most attractive man I've ever met.
Are you having an affair with my husband?
I had read both Winds of War and War and Remembrance and decided that Rhoda was the part that I had to play. And I had literally made up my mind that I was the only person in the world who could play Rhoda. She was a military wife. And the life of a military wife in the 20s and 30s, and probably even today as well, is to really be the helpmate to your husband, to be prepared to pick up and leave and go somewhere totally foreign and different and strange and new whenever they decide to send him somewhere else. Your success and recognition as a woman is based on the success and recognition of your husband. Her life was sort of caught up in the glamour of her husband's life and his position.
You look absolutely marvelous.
Oh, I knew you could say that. Oh, and look at you. Oh, so smart. Oh, a few new gray hairs, you old thing. But very attractive.
Polly Bergen is Rhoda. Rhoda was pretty. Rhoda was trouble. Rhoda was irreverent. Rhoda was a feminist. Rhoda was fighting her own, and Rhoda had a stature and a look about her and a sort of a cocky attitude, and Polly Bergen did that to a T. She had a twinkle in her eye and a way of walking into a room, a way of holding her costume and a fabulous hat tilted on her head that just made her jump off that screen.
Well, Return of the Warrior. You remembered you had a family, how nice.
What is all this?
Are you going to be busy next Saturday?
Not that I know of, no.
Oh, no? Well, fine. How about coming to St. John's Church, then, and giving Madeline away to the sailboat?
Well, congratulations. Oh.
Dan, I first met him at a screening of George Washington, a miniseries that I did, and he came up to me at the screening, and I never met the guy. He goes, "Hey, you, I got a part for you in something I'm going to be doing." You know, I say, "Oh, okay, great." You know, I was just sitting there watching myself be George Washington. He says, "Yeah, it's this submarine captain in this thing I'm doing, and I'll be talking to you," he says. 6 months later, I got a call. He offered me the part. I think his ability to cast is impeccable. And so he trusted his people, that actors, and I think the crew members around him, that if the timing was right, they would do their best job, and it would be best for the piece. And his job was to make sure that everybody was sort of in sync.
Barry Bostwick was interesting casting. Barry had never done anything like this. He played Lady Astor, their submarine commander. I'll never forget when I decided he was the guy for this part. A lot of people said to me, "Oh, you're out of your mind. This guy can't possibly play this part. What did you ever see that convinced you this guy could play this part?" I said, "George Washington? No, that's not. I just had a feeling he could play it." And he was perfect. He was better than perfect.
Well, gentlemen, let's see if he's in view yet. Put me on the bearing. Up scope. Target generated bearing 032, sir. Well, there he is. Right on. Range, mark, 7,000 yards. Down scope. Angle on the bow, 27 port. Right on the money, Billy. He's there, over the hill, hull down. Let's go to battle station submerged. Sound the general alarm. Aye, aye, sir. All crew, battle station submerged.
I remember when we cast Sharon Stone as Janice. I thought she was incredible. I mean, she was just fantastic. I loved the way she looked. A lot of people warned me that she couldn't act. Well, she fooled everybody. I mean, she was absolutely sensational. I can remember in one sequence that we did where she had to show a lot of emotion, and she was just perfect. I mean, it just made me cry. I took her aside and I said, "Let me tell you something. You hang in there and you get the right break, you're going to be a big star." And she looked at me and she smiled. She said, "Well, thank you. No one's ever said that to me before." And I said, "Yeah, well, I'm saying it to you, remember it." And after she hit it big, she called me up and she said, "I still remember you saying that."
How have you been?
Okay. Let me look at you. You're becoming more like Warren.
I'll never be like Warren.
I had a wonderful time filming it. I think I learned a lot, I gave a lot. I got a lot back from Curtis. And it was one of the best experiences I ever had with a character. It was a great character to begin with, because as I said, he was a multi-layered guy.
You do rave with the high brass talking. Imagine a mere journalist being offered such a tour, eh?
What on earth happened to your hand, Philip?
Why went on maneuvers with the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders? Got bitten by a centipede. It was a nasty brute, about a foot long. Didn't know whether to kiss it or kill it.
I believe that the character of General von Loen would have been amongst the plotters had he had perhaps an inch more moral courage in order to push him over the border into that group.
In my opinion, there is only one propagandist in the world who is shrewder than Dr. Goebbels.
Huh? Who is that?
Franklin Roosevelt. With just 2 words, 2 sledgehammer words, which are even now ringing around the world, he has announced that we are losing the war. And to forestall any possibility of a separate peace in the East, he has publicly assured Stalin that the Allies are in it to the end.
It's always an added responsibility when you're playing either a living person or a person who has lived quite recently, and someone who is a historical figure, notorious in my case of Eichmann, but a historical figure. The first thing you go about it is reading as much as you can on the character, and you'd be surprised how little there is about Eichmann. Very few books have been written about him. It's probably because there isn't that much to say. He was very much a clerk. He was very much a civil servant. The only interesting thing I found out about him was that while he was rising to power, as it were, he was very subservient to anyone who was above him, and he was very bullying to anyone who was below him.
Can Reichsfuhrer Himmler expect a progress report fairly soon on those 118 Jews?
I'll do my best.
Excellent. Oh, I'm so pleased I could come here and we could thrash this out.
It was a dynamic role, and I felt that it would express something that I hadn't really had a chance to express before in television or movies. It was an historical character. It was something that obsessed the entire world. It was a giant role. It was the definitive role. And it would require an actor who could identify with it. And that identification is, as I mentioned before, a player, a personality that could win, woo, dominate, galvanize an audience. And I felt few actors could do that.
Ah, yes. You gentlemen of the officer corps, with your fonts before your names, who never dirtied your polished boots in a trench, the kind of trench I served in for 4 years.
I repeat my request to be permitted to resign.
Yes, now! Now that you have ruined my Eastern campaign, I designed it with crystal clarity. It was bound to lead to victory if you had done as you were told.
The miniseries was a unique television form, and only in television could that exist, where people would sit night after night really around a national fire, campfire, if you will, and become part of a national experience and talk about it the next day, and then talk about it the day after that, and then talk about it the day after that. It took almost 5 years to do War and Remembrance. When you're doing 30 hours of television and you're doing it on a miniseries level and you're doing $130 million worth of production, it's going to take a long period of time. There is nothing in the history of television that was as big or as grand or as ambitious as War and Remembrance. When you consider what it was and what it cost and what it took on the part of Dan Curtis to simply just do it, is one of the greatest accomplishments in the history of this medium.
War and Remembrance is the story of the Victor Henrys, an American Navy family, caught in the turbulent aftermath of Pearl Harbor, preparing themselves for the inevitable turmoil, which is their destiny.
We're about to fight the biggest battle of the war.
Here we go!
War and Remembrance sweeps back the pages of history and brings alive the turmoil and the tragedy, the passion and the fury, the glory and the horror of a world at war.
It is the Führer's unshakable will to cleanse the continent of Jews.
Get out while you can.
Don't you think I want to get out?
If this war goes on 2 more years, every Jew in Europe will be dead. Natalie's no journalist. Her documents are fraudulent. The documents break down. She's gone.
Attack! Attack! Attack!
I love you, Victor. I'll never change.
Ian McShane, John Rhys Davies, Chaim Topol, Robert Morley, Jeremy Kemp, Ralph Bellamy, Peter Graves, Barry Bostwick, David Dukes, Michael Woods, Hart Bachner, Sharon Stone, Victoria Tennant, Polly Bergen, Sir John Gielgud, Jane Seymour, and Robert Mitchum. The motion picture event of a lifetime. War and Remembrance.
This is Hart Bachner. The literature on World War II is vast and constantly growing. It's by far the best documented event in history. Herman Wouk, the author of War and Remembrance and Winds of War, recommends the following books for viewers who seek to learn more about the war and its various aspects. The Second World War by Winston Churchill in 6 volumes. Hitler, A Study in Tyranny by Alan Bullock. The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William L. Shire. Russia at War, 1941 to 1945 by Alexander Worth. History of the United States Naval Operations in World War II by Samuel Eliot Morison in 16 volumes. The Destruction of the European Jews by Raoul Hilberg in 3 volumes. Roosevelt and Hopkins by Robert E. Sherwood. And various volumes of the Office of the Chief of Military History, Department of the Army, USA, including Command Decisions, edited by Kent Roberts Greenfield. Strategic Planning for Coalition Warfare, 1941 to 1942, by Maurice Matloff. Strategy and Command, The First 2 Years, by Lewis Morton. And The Supreme Command, by Forrest C. Pogue.